Heyo, welcome back to the Undrafted and Unqualified Fantasy Football Podcast. I'm Anthony, here with Vinny. Back again, more rankings episodes. We're churning these through. So, we got our top 12 running backs today. And yeah, we did the 13 to 24 the last episode. So hopefully you guys have seen that. So you can now maybe make some guesses, things like that for our top 12. But we're officially in August now too, which means we are in the heat of it. We really looking at what we have planned the rest of the summer before the season starts. We don't have too many more episodes either, which is kind of crazy to think about. But we're about what four weeks away from the season starting, which is awesome. My one of my leagues, we just figured out our punishment for the end of this year. We're getting the league going again. Got to start figuring out draft dates. We did our
What's
draft
the
order, so all that's coming together. It's really exciting being in August now.
what's the punishment?
We decided last night the winning vote. We had like three finalists because people just put mad like options this year. The one that got in the final one was the trick or treating in the summer. So you gotta like costume of the league's choice, go in a neighborhood door to door, and you
Wow,
can't
that's a good
stop till
one.
you get 10 candies. So I think somebody else has seen that online. Like I know I saw it online. Somebody else suggested it, but yeah,
That's a good one.
it's a good one.
That's a fun one. Like
Yeah,
nothing too serious, but
yeah. I hope I don't get last place.
I don't
But
think you will. We got
well,
our
yeah,
tapes
yeah, hey,
here.
hey, hey, we're pretty qualified over here now.
Yeah, I know. That's what I was gonna say. We got our we got our stuff going on.
Yeah, yeah, I'm a three-time champ, repeating champ in our league, and my other
Yeah,
one I won 4 years ago. So
and we just set up
see,
our. I don't know. By the way, the way you set up those keepers, yeah, that must have taken a lot of time. But that's how you know the season's back because people are willing to
yeah,
do that and
yeah,
ready
yeah.
to go.
Quick aside with that, like just for y'all listening, we're in a keeper league together. We get two keepers, keep them around above where we drafted them. Undrafted free agents, they keep in the eighth round. And basically, our commish made this chart, every single one of our players, and where we would keep them and their ADP of where they're going.
Yeah.
So he did that with every player on every team, that's good work.
Yeah,
So
I wonder. I need to ask him how long that took him because
yeah, yeah,
I don't think
he
I
did it
even
last year too.
did he. Wow, wow.
Yeah, so he's dedicated, good commish over
Mhm.
there.
Oh yeah,
But yeah, let's get into it. Enough of the asides. So yeah, top 12 today, and yeah, we'll go from there. So again, comparison. We're gonna be we're taking our two individual rankings, putting them together. We'll check with ECR, we'll check with ADP, so the pros and the rest of the fantasy community, and we'll kind of see where we are. Um, but yeah, without further ado, our RB12, we don't need any honorable mentions today because you already got our 13 through 24. So coming in at number 12 for us, we have Derrick Henry. Both of us have him there. Looking at the pros, right in line there. ADP, we are one spot lower. Um, yeah, I mean, we can't keep doubting this guy. It's that simple. Like, we can't keep doubting this guy. I think the age really gets baked in here when we bring him down to 12. He was at like 8 last year. He finished top 10 again, I believe. And that's in PPR, and he's getting like 50% of snaps. But they're going to give him carries. He's going to get the work. He's unbelievable when he gets the work, and this is a great offense. So we'll see how it works. I know as well as the age, I'm also baking in the fact that they lost some run blocking. They lost Charlie Kohler, great blocking tight end. He went over to LA with the Chargers. They lost Isaiah Likely. They lost Tyler Linderbaum. They're one of the best centers in the league, if not the best. He left for a big payday from the Raiders. So, there's just some pieces there that I do have my concerns about. And as he's getting older, like how much work are they going to give him? So there's some question marks, but I don't want to keep doubting this guy. So, I think 12 is a fair price. I think, I'd just say community, I think we got it right. So,
Yeah, I feel like it is, we did get it right, but it also just feels safe
mhm.
because of the fact that, looking at his past finishes, like yeah, you mentioned he finished top 10 and he was seventh last year. The year before his first year in Baltimore, he finished third. And then if you keep going down the list, like it's his last year in Tennessee, eighth, fourth. So like this guy is like everyone knows he's a fantasy stud.
Yep.
But like you mentioned, like it's real the kind of concerns of the one of the biggest one that you maybe didn't mention was Harbaugh. Like he's gone. And so, I think that could work into Derrick Henry's favor because of the fact that people started to feel that he maybe was getting a little cute with how he used Derrick Henry last year. Of course, like you can only use Derrick Henry one way, just hand him the ball.
Yep.
But like Justice Hill was in the mix last year at some points on receiving downs. They were down in games and not playing Derrick Henry. So who knows? Maybe this could be like a boost he was kind of looking for, and it works to his benefit. But those O line losses and even Patrick Ricard not being
Oh,
there
for sure.
anymore.
Yeah.
So there is some concerns, and like you said, the age. It just feels also sort of safe, I guess you could call it, because of
Yeah.
those facts and that he could finish the top five RB, and we wouldn't blink an eye.
Yeah. Yeah, for sure. I think that's a good point though too. Ricard is gone. Um,
hmm
and yeah, they're saying it's a faster paced offense with Declan Doyle at OC now, which yeah, like if it is awesome, I really wonder what that looks like for Derrick
Yeah.
Henry. But you have to believe in the Ravens. We talked about it all last year after a slow start. Like go buy him if you believe the Ravens will start winning games again. And it's kind of just the same way to me this year. Like, do you believe the Ravens are going to be good? Because if not, like you said, they're gonna use Justice Hill in the passing downs. So,
Yep.
um, yeah, that's part of the factor.
Yeah. And I will say I'm very comfortable with him as my RB2. Like that's a
Mhm.
team that I'm very happy with if he ends up being my RB2. So
For sure.
that's like the number 12 spot feels even better, like based on our rings and looking at a team that you potentially draft. You're like, yeah, like I love him as my RB2.
For sure. I'm completely on board with that. Our RB11 coming in here is Omarion Hampton. Um, Number nine. The pros got him at nine. The ADP is at 10, so we're slightly down. Um, One spot, two spots. I honestly didn't expect to see that. I think Hampton's going to be great. I think we're all on board with Mike McDaniel being there now, the new play caller. It's going to be exciting. He does great work with running backs, so that should be great for Hampton. He has three down pedigree. It's a good offense, good team. So he showed flashes last year. I think there's just a lot to like. I think the concern of why you can't put him higher, at least for me, is we didn't get to see a ton of it last year. It was a very small sample size before he got hurt. And, who knows? They did bring in Keaton Mitchell, who Keaton Mitchell is kind of a speedster. Like he has some juice in the tank and he's a good running back. So I wonder how much they'll utilize him. But overall, I think Hampton's going to be a fun player. There's just certainly 10 other guys I think I'd feel comfortable taking over him.
Yeah, no, honestly, on a similar page with what you said, the only thing I would throw in there is that, Mike McDaniel does, like you said, give a boost to running backs. We've
Mhm.
seen it with Achan. We saw it with Mostert, even the crazy
Yep.
year that he had when they were like slinging it on all cylinders and everyone was just putting up fantasy points. But that does also bring into like make me question a little bit of you brought up Keaton Mitchell, and I don't think Keaton Mitchell's going to be this fantasy stud like a Raheem Mostert or Devon Achan, but Mike McDaniel, while producing good fantasy running backs, does also kind of have a history of liking to use two running backs regularly. And like we saw that what I mentioned with Moser and Achan, which was sort of an outlier because you don't see two running backs that fantasy relevant that often on the same team. But even with to a way much lesser extent, he's tried to get Ollie Gordon involved with Achan, and it always seems like he wants another guy that he can always rely on in certain situations. So to mix that with Hampton, we haven't really seen a full sample size from him. We've seen flashes, like you said, with the fact that like Mike McDaniel does like to use multiple pieces at the running back position. So that for me is why I can't get as high as maybe the pros are on him or ADP is on him, just because of I feel like that's people are talking about Keaton Mitchell, but not necessarily in the way of like this is how Mike McDaniel likes to run an offense.
Yeah, I also wonder though too, like Achan isn't your typical three down back. So I,
That's
I
fair.
wonder too, like Ollie Gordon's a big dude, so it's like, yeah, just plug him in at the goal line. I mean, Achan is unbelievable, especially for his size. But that's a I wonder too, like, do you kind of, this is a question for y'all listening to this, like, do you buy the fact that, he likes to use two running backs or at least two, or do you
Mhm.
want to buy the fact that it was more of an Achan thing and his size? So, make that judgment. I think Hampton could be utilized a lot at the goal line because I don't think Keaton Mitchell's that guy. But
No.
I wouldn't be surprised if Keaton Mitchell pops in here and there and, they utilize him third downs, passing downs. So it's just something to consider.
Yep.
Our RB10, we got Saquon Barkley here. I'm a little bit lower. Vinny's pulling him up by just a slight bit. The pros got him at 10. The ADP got him at 8. So, it seems like drafters are back in on Barkley. I'm definitely not. Um, what's kind of bringing you back with Barkley?
Yeah, I mean, so it just feels like kind of there's not much like statistical logic to it. Obviously this year he had last year was a down year, and it was going to be impossible to follow up what he did 2 years ago with that his first year in Philly. So I think that it for me kind of bakes into it where it just feels like once there's a regression, then there's going to be a boost for him kind of getting a much lesser workload last year, and he still had 280 carries. We're not talking about like a guy that like took a back seat, but the year prior he had like over 350 touches total. So that's a monster year, a monster amount of volume, and it was kind of I think we all kind of expected it, maybe not to that extent last year, but a new OC comes in. They've been trying to find a guy that works with them consistently ever since Kellen Moore left. Or no, right?
Yeah, yeah, I'm
Yeah,
pretty sure.
Kellen Moore left because that was like the year where Saquon went crazy.
Mhm.
And so yeah, it just feels like I'm not going to drop statistics on you because they really probably aren't there for him underlying after his season last year. But it just feels like a bounce back opportunity and to potentially get a guy that is capable of finishing so high at the position here at the end of the second round, maybe like middle of the second round. It kind of falls in that Derrick Henry tier for me, where I just wouldn't be surprised if this guy rips off a top five RB5 season. He's your RB2.
Yeah, I mean, I wouldn't be surprised either because it will be his backfield. But like I'm looking through some of the metrics right now, and it just wasn't
Yeah,
a great year. And I will say I think you can chalk up a lot of it to missing Lane Johnson. Like he is that big of a deal. But I just have my question marks of the offense as a whole too, and then the tush push they love using at the goal line. So I I wonder if Saquon can return to form. I really don't know if I buy the narrative that he's going to be utilized a lot in the passing game. I just I think he'll get a ton of work. I think he'll be great. And I think this is a good spot for him here at 10. I really just, the next guys we're going to mention, I really just don't want to move him above just because I think it's better situations. There's more upside with the other guys. But I don't think it's any problem whether you're RB1 or 2 to have Saquon on your team. We know who this guy is, but there's also the question marks. The age cliff, is he there? But yeah, I mean, I don't want to doubt the player at all though, because do love Saquon. He's been so good. So yeah, I think I'll ride it out until he's done before I say, all right, yeah, he's cooked. But last year definitely had a couple warning flags.
definitely. It just feels like he's got to have some juice left in the tank and like to like rip off a really good year.
Yeah, for sure. And yeah, there's also like the historical stats of like you have 400 plus touches. The next
Yeah.
year you're not returning to that form at all.
Hmm.
Um, all right, RB9. We have James Cook, and feels a little low. He's at 7 with the pros. ADP's got him at six across the board too, which that's high. Um, James Cook, the thing for me is he played unreal last year. And I think they are going to try and get back to mixing in some other running backs. But this is an offense. You want players, running backs in good offenses. This is one of them. I do still think he's going to be very good. I just wonder if it takes a little bit of a hit again and, he loses some of the work he got because this was like a career high in terms of touches and all of that, snap percentage. So I wonder if he's going to be on the field as much as he was last year. But, again, there's not much to say. I think he's a very, very good running back. He is a capable pass catcher, so hopefully they continue to utilize him at least a little bit there. But he's efficient. He's efficient. Let's just hope the efficiency doesn't catch up with him. And if it does, let's hope the carries boost so it can kind of outweigh the efficiency dip. But yeah, I mean, Bill's running back. You love that regardless.
Yeah, no, it is really surprising to hear him all the way up at six in some cases of ADP, just because like looking at his year last year, that just feels like we're people are drafting him at his ceiling.
Yeah, I
He
agree.
he won the rushing title last year with
Hmm.
1,600 yards. Like
Hmm.
you said, crazy year, 12 touchdowns, and that was still only good for the RB6 finish last year in
Yeah.
PPR formats. So to me, it's like how are we going to draft him again? Like, are we expecting him to win the rushing title again, rush for 1,600? That just feels like you said, kind of unrealistic, and there's some sort of regression baked in. I don't think he's going to, he'll still have a great year. He'll still have 12, 1,300 yards and 10 plus touchdowns, and it'll be a top 10 finish. But that just kind of feels like it equates to like an RB9 sort of finish where we have him. And I feel much better about this ranking because of the fact of we're drafting him at his ceiling, and there's really no like we can't just if he took a big step forward in the receiving game, then it would be like okay, we can't really predict that because that's not really who he was. So if that's the case, then that's how you kind of get burned on this ranking spot. But I just historically he hasn't proven like you said he's capable, but that's not a big part of his game. So it just feels like that's way too high at six.
Yeah, I think it's a good point to mention. It's kind of his ceiling, like drafting him at his ceiling, right? Like, he had what was it, 12 touchdowns last year, and that was with some regression baked in, but he was still
Yep.
at 5.25 yards a carry, 960 after contact. Like he was very good last year. 33 receptions. I kind of feel like that's about where he'll be again. It feels pretty average. So yeah, it just does feel like, tick that down to 10 touchdowns. Still a great year, but that's two less. Those yards will probably come down a bit, like you said, maybe like 1,300 yards. That's 300 less, right? Because then he had, yes, 1,600 last year. So yeah, I'm kind of with you. I just don't know if he returns what he did last year, and especially at his cost.
Yeah, yeah. He was a tough one where I started to see him fall in my personal rankings, and then it was just like I feel like I need to get this guy up. But then looking at him, like I really feel fine here, and
Yeah,
so in the names we're gonna bring up, it just there's more upside involved. So
for sure. Yeah, and coming in at number 8, we have Ken Walker, who Vinny's got up at 6 actually. So that's pulling up a little bit. But Ken Walker coming in at 8 for us. He's down at 11 in the pros, and then ADP he's down at 12. So I'm not up at 6 with Vinny, but I'm still at 9, which is above ADP and everything. So I'll let you go ahead though, because six is definitely bullish. So I want to hear what you love about
yeah,
Vinny.
yeah, it feels just like I've talked a lot about in other ranking episodes or just in general, kind of the logic of I like to see a team like push their chips in on a guy and show that like show the fantasy community that there's really no other way besides an injury that this guy won't be who we think he is. And they did that by like paying him. He's obviously coming off that Super Bowl MVP run where just blew up in the playoffs and every like for his whole career, everyone was like, this is who we thought this guy could be. And without that was without Charbonnet. And so it was like, they had this dynamic throughout their whole career where like Charbonnet was the goal line guy and he was stealing touchdowns. That's fantasy points. So it never really got going from a fantasy perspective. But to see that happen in all in one swing, him get paid the one of the top five most or highest paid running backs in the league, to the Kansas City Chiefs with an Andy Reid led offense with Patrick Mahomes at the helm, and then obviously like Rasheed, like just a really good offense. So you talked about before. So all the chips and pieces kind of like just feel like they've come together. And the injury history does kind of scare me a little bit, but like looking at his um like finishes, it's really not as much of a concern as I thought. Like there's really only 1 year where he only played 11 games. Otherwise, he's played 15 plus games in every year of his career. So the injury history, like I felt like that was kind of a narrative I fell into, and when I took a deeper look, it's not really there. So I just think this guy could win the rushing title like early on with Mahomes kind of easing back in. They're gonna have to rely on a guy that like Mahomes isn't what he can fully be at like the first few games of the year and even first half of the year. So I just think like the sky's the limit, and this guy could like potentially even finish as the RB1 overall if he puts it all together, because there's really no one else in that room that's going to challenge him for anything.
Yeah. Yeah, they did draft one of the rookies.
Emmett
Uh,
Johnson.
yeah,
Yep.
Emmett Johnson. But yeah, I think Ken Walker's got a really high ceiling. I think the offense might not be as good as we're used to. That's my biggest concern. Is like I don't want to treat the Chiefs like they're the best offense in the league right now, because they haven't been for a few years. Bieniemy being back, I love it. I love it for the run game. I love it for the offense, truthfully. And I kind of expect him to just return back into good form under Andy Reid, because once he left, he was not good at all. Like he became like a running backs coach, and then he left and was at like UCLA, I think. So
Yeah.
like
Yeah.
he really kind of fell off. But being back under Andy Reid, I think they clearly worked together with the number of Super Bowl appearances. So and Bieniemy was great with the running game, so I like that a lot. He can catch passes. It's great. I think I'm just being slightly more conservative, not as conservative as the rest of the community, but just a little more conservative than you are, just because I think I want to see more versus just the Super Bowl where it was just working, and they ran him into the ground. So I just want to see it a little bit more, I think, versus just baking that into his price and saying like, oh yeah, this guy's going to be a stud. So you took the more bullish route, but I
Yeah.
definitely was like, all right, let me pump the brakes till I see it more.
Yeah, and I get it because like I had a similar take about Hampton of like I need to see it more, but this is a 4 year NFL veteran. Like we haven't seen that level of production ever, but this is a guy that's been around the league, and we've seen it with guys kind of change of scenery and kind of take that step forward where it just continues. So you're right, it is definitely taking a shot on a guy, but just all the pieces are there, and it feels like sort of in my mind, I don't want to say it, but like a can't miss situation unless there's an injury.
All right, all right, there you go. Number seven, we're both there. We got Chase Brown. Chase Brown is number six for the pros, and number nine ADP. So it looks like we're in line with the pros that he should be higher. I'm fully on board with that. I think this dude's going to be a stud. I kind of can't get him any lower, and I was even considering bumping him up over the next few guys that we have listed. It's a little too tough to do that, but
Yeah.
like Chase Brown, this Bengals offense is probably still the best in the league, and he was so good with Burrow back. And then also, he was good when Flacco was there. And guess who their backup is this year? Flacco is back as their backup. So with him, he was like RB, what, in points per game towards the back half. I think he was RB7 in points per game to end the second half since like Burrow came back or something like that. But with that being said, it's like that was with Flacco too. I think he still finished at RB7. Maybe he was even higher in points per game. I could be getting this totally wrong. Um,
Yeah, I wish I knew.
yeah,
But like it was
I'm gonna
something
pull stuff
crazy.
up, but
It
yeah,
it honestly
he
had to be.
finished at seven. So
Yeah.
I'll pull up where he was during that like back half when, his numbers started bouncing back up. I'll let you talk about him for just a second though.
Yeah, I mean, like this was a guy last year that I was super high on. He was involved. I think I know I had a take where I one of my hot takes was that he would finish as a top three RB last year.
Mhm.
And honestly, he kind of got easy. He was easy to forget last year when Burrow got hurt. The Bengals offense just wasn't sort of the same as we're used to and kind of expecting to be last year. And it kind of had to remind. I remember you reminded me at one point. I was like, "Oh, like Chase Brown just sucked," and like you could kind of say that based on like Burrow not being there because he's like I said, it's just not as exciting of an offense. Joe Flacco's there, but he was very good for almost like all of last year, and he finished. That was good enough for the RB7 finish, mostly to do with his run with Burrow at the end of the year last year. But
Mhm.
guess what? He gets Burrow back healthy this year, and it seems like that's a big if now, based on recent things of like if Burrow will stay healthy the whole year. But he is healthy right now. In a lot of our rankings, we're not going to predict injuries, like we've said. So that's the case for him. We've seen what he can do with Burrow in this offense of just like one of the best offenses in the league, and they're going to score fantasy points, and he's going to be the guy that kind of gets to do everything, whether it's goal line work, receiving work, first and second down carries. Like he's going to be the guy for everything there. They there's really been no one to challenge that. So yeah, no, it's going to be a monster year, and again, like I can't have the same hot take over, but I
Yeah.
think he could be a top three RB easy.
Yeah, I completely agree. And this will just solidify it, right? So from week 7 on, I believe that's when Flacco got there. I could be wrong on that, but I believe it
Mhm.
was around that time. From week 7 on, though, he averaged 20 fantasy points a game. Good for
Wow.
RB4. That was behind McCaffrey, Gibbs, and Bijan. From week 13, when that's when Burrow came back, week 13 on, so 6 game sample size, he averaged 22 a game. That's RB2 behind Bijan. That's it. And it was just unbelievable. Like the averages right there. It's like 2 points better than the next guy. Well, 1 point better than McCaffrey. But regardless, like Chase Brown is he's putting up numbers with these guys we're talking about in the first 3 picks of fantasy drafts. So with these QBs there, I think he's in for a monster year again. We know he can do it. He gets the work. He gets the receiving work. Um, it's one of those names where you really want to take these guys. So I think we're both in, and even looking at that more, I may end up bumping him up a little bit after we continue on. But yeah, I mean, I'm super excited for Chase Brown, and I got pick 8 in my home league. If he comes around in the second round, like third round, sometimes he's falling to the third.
Yeah.
It's like there's a lot of places I would consider. Maybe not first round. I may not consider him there, but like I wouldn't even early second if you want to go that high. I'm okay with it. The one
No.
two turn,
Yeah.
like
I
man,
wouldn't
I'm
blame
in.
you at all. Like if
Yeah,
you could get like an Amon-Ra and Chase Brown start or like something to that nature, like
yeah,
that's a ridiculous start and you feel really good about it.
yeah, yeah. It's we're clearly in. We'll end there.
Yeah.
Um, Number 6 for us comes in is Devon Achan. Pros got him at 8. So slightly higher there. The ADP's got him at 5. So we're kind of split a little bit. Because I'm at 5, you're at 8. So we're kind of there. It averaged out to 6 for us. Um, yeah, why do you got him down to 8? What's kind of keeping you from putting him a little higher?
Yeah, I think it has to do with like the popular narrative surrounding him that like it's going to be a bad offense. I think we all know that we're not. It's Malik Willis and God knows who at receiver. So we don't know. We know what the outcome is going to be on the offensive side of things, but I think that's the popular opinion is to kind of put Devon Achane into that sort of narrative and be like, all right, he's going to be bad too. Well, I don't think that's going to be the case because I still have him as my RB8. That's a really good year.
Mhm.
And we have him here at 6. So, obviously we're there on him. But I think I'm down at 8 because of the fact that while he still was productive and very almost elite in a lot of cases from a fantasy perspective last year with a bad offense, this was an offense that wasn't good still. So that not much changes from that perspective. But it just feels like that this year there's a chance to be like some duds, like some serious duds where we're looking at like 5, 6 point weeks. And it's just a game where the offense never gets going. And or maybe he never scores the point. They never score a touchdown, and he's sitting at like 8 points and a touchdown. Give him like a nice week, like a okay week to kind of save a week for your team. But yeah, it just feels like there's some duds inbound, and I kind of I guess bake that in to like in weeks where they just can't get the offense going at all. It's not going to be good for Devon Achance, even still if he gets like a few 5 receptions and rushes for 70 yards. Like it's just not in that territory where you want your first round running back to be. So that's why I kind of put him down low because I would never draft him at the end of the first. And I feel like these guys that we're talking about are the ones being drafted at like confidently at the end of the first or early second, and I'm just not there with HM.
That's fair. I think, I think Chase Brown and Achan, you could go either way. I got Achan higher. I'm kind of in the opposite camp where you think some duds are in store for him. I think just he was uber consistent last year. I kind of think he's going to have a floor of like double digit points. So to me, he's one of those picks you make at the 1-2 turn. He'll never lose you a week. That's how I feel about Achan. Like maybe he's not going to be winning you a ton of weeks, but like I do not want to play against Devon Achan. Like I'm not going to enjoy seeing that in
Yeah.
my team's like my opponent's lineup. And if Achan's the last dude up on a Monday night and he needs like 10 points, I'm chalking that up as a loss. Like there's just no way he goes under. I think as you said, it's also a good point. They were a bad offense last year, so people are writing it off like crazy. Yeah, they have like a 3.5 point like win total for over under, which is extremely low. This team's probably going to be terrible. And there's a lot of question marks. There's okay, new quarterback, new offensive coach, no Mike McDaniel, who we know is great for running backs. So there are a lot of question marks. I just really think this offense will go around him, and I think he's going to get a lot of receiving work, plus the rushing work. So hopefully they don't run him into the ground too much. But I'm looking at like stuff from last year. He was fifth in rushing yards in the league. He had 8 rushing touchdowns. I think that's doable again. The 67 receptions for not even 500 yards and 4 receiving touchdowns. Like, I think that's all doable. 19% target share. Wouldn't be surprised if that goes up to more of like that McCaffrey 23%. So yeah, I just think it's hard for me to put him any lower. I know it's so bad, but the talent for him, he's just so good. And then,
Oh yeah.
other guys who we haven't mentioned them yet, but you'll hear them this episode is like Genty and Bijan Robinson. It's like, oh well, these guys are gonna be so good. Bijan's in like conversations for the 101. And it's like, well, the Falcons aren't a good team. And
Yeah.
the Raiders aren't a good team. So it's a weird year because we always talk about take running backs on good teams. I mean, we talked about Henry, Hampton, Barkley, James Cook, Ken Walker, and Chase Brown, all insanely good offenses, if not great teams. And then you have Achan here, and then we'll get to Genty and Bijan. So it's like, what do you do with those guys? It's just it's a little funny. I'm just buying into the talent. I think he'll have so much usage. So I'm still in, but the ceiling is certainly capped.
Yeah, and it's also interesting because I feel like in the quarterback position, just to make like a comparison, in the quarterback position, like people like Jackson Dart and Jaden Daniels get this extreme boost for just being having the rushing side of things that it is just makes like such a consistent fantasy floor, and it almost feels like Devon Achane gets like bumped down for having
Yeah.
such a consistent receiving side of things, which you would think like why wouldn't this be an upgrade for him? So I think like that, like I said, I have him at 8, but that doesn't mean I'm out on him. Like if he falls to the middle of the second, then I'm all over it. Like that's like a slam dunk pick. I feel like for me, but Yeah, it just feels like, that receiving upside is in ridiculous and probably the highest in the league, maybe aside from Gibbs. And this guy can legitimately get 100 targets this year from the art running back position. So by no means am I out on him. I think we both agree on that parts of things. It's just where the rankings fall.
Yeah, I think it's fair to say though, you're out on his price right now. And, for me, I'd be okay with him at the 1-2 turn. I
Yeah.
think, depending on the pick, like 12, I'd definitely feel better taking him in the first. But, early second, I think I'd feel okay with that. Depends who I'd go in the first, but,
Yeah.
yeah, if he falls, man, I'm scooping him. He's gonna be good. So,
Yeah. 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 Yeah.
number 5. As I just mentioned, we have some guys to talk about. Ashton Genty is here for us at 5. ECR's got him at 5. ADP has him at 7. So I think the public is a little concerned about Genty, but I think it's there's more upside for this offense than the Dolphins. I think there's a lot more upside for this offense. And I think the offense will run through him and Bowers. Like, very simple. Genty, Bowers, Genty, Bowers. Give him all the work. We saw flashes against Houston last year, like one of the best defenses in the league. So, yeah, I think Genty, 3 down pedigree. I think he can absolutely take a step forward because it was horrible last year. You bring in Linderbaum, you make some changes, some upgrades to the offensive line. You bring in Clint Kubiak to be the head coach. I love that for him. Even if they do use some change of pace, he has the 3 down pedigree. I don't think Kubiak's going to be afraid to use him. So I'm in on Genty. I think he's going a little early for my liking. Even though I have him priced here at like the RB, we have him at RB5. It's still a little early, like that back end of the first. That feels really early for Genty, just because it's still the Raiders. There's still some concern. Same thing with like Achan. You're like, okay, middle second, I'd feel good. I'd probably feel the same way here with Genty, but the pedigree is there, and the receiving work was there for him last year. Like, it's a very underrated part of his game that's not talked about
Mhm.
enough. Touchdowns should go up. He's an exciting player too. He's one of those guys where you draft him, you're like, yeah, yeah, like Ashton Genty's on my team. Like, so he's one of those players. It's not a boring pick by any means. You just There's some concerns, but we're certainly baking in that ceiling into his draft price.
Yeah, and I think also the fact of just like historically of the most recent top 10 running backs picked of like Gibbs and Bijan, for them, these guys are the 1, 2 overall picks in fantasy drafts right now. And you when you take into account how their first years went, it was similar to Genty's, where it's like a back end of the first RB or RB1 or low RB1 finish for them. And then they really kicked it into gear next year. And I feel like that's kind of also what us and a lot of other people are baking in, is that he's just going to take that massive step forward. But in Genty's case, he's not only taking a step into year 2, but his team got a lot better. I mean, they Kubiak obviously coming off a Super Bowl win and managing that RB committee of Ken Walker and Charbonnet to perfection for the most part all year last year. And then seeing what like he would do with one guy with the finish Ken Walker had, it's just really exciting kind of to picture what that could be with such a talent in Ashton Genty. So yeah, and then also I'm glad you mentioned the receiving work because it is real. Like this guy was peppered with targets last year and really scored a lot of receiving touchdowns as well. So there's just so much upside here. And I think the one thing that you could kind of look at is if the Raiders are just a really bad team again. And that's very much in the realm of possibility. But like we talked about with HN, I think that doesn't necessarily mean with these superior talents and other pieces surrounding him that can like he will get the ball. I think that's okay if the Raiders get the number 1 pick. Like he will still have a good year.
Yeah. So there were 7 running backs last year with 50 plus receptions. Um, Genty's one of them. He also had a high 14% target share. And that's with the likes of Chase Brown. That's with the likes of Devon Achan, Kenny Gainwell, Gibbs, Bijan, and McCaffrey. Like, this guy can do it. And if he gets any more work, any more receptions, like it's going to be a big year for him. So, yeah, definitely exciting player. Number four, number three and four, you can flip, right? I think we have them flipped right now, but I've been going back and forth between the two myself. Number four, we got Jonathan Taylor, and that's in line with the rest of the community. Pros, ADP, it's all there. I think there's the big concerns about Daniel Jones. Like the fall off when Daniel Jones got hurt was crazy. But at the start of the year, Jonathan Taylor was on pace to shatter records. Like
Yeah.
he had 18 rushing touchdowns last year. So this guy, I think there's also like he doesn't get the receiving work. Like reception wise, he had 46, so he can absolutely do it. But it's not to the likes of some of those other names: Bijan, Gibbs, McCaffrey, Chase Brown, Ashton Genty. So there's that you can bake in a little bit. There's the concerns about Daniel Jones, but this guy as a rusher, he might be the best in the league. Like
Yeah.
as a pure runner, like this guy's insane, and I'm tempted to flip him simply because now. I'm hearing a lot about Daniel Jones. If you watch him in practice, he's in like 11 on 11s and he's like fully cleared, and you wouldn't know he's hurt without knowing he's hurt. So I think there's a lot to like there. I think Jonathan Taylor's in for another big year. The offense it feels a lot like the Raiders to me. It'll run through him and Warren, the tight end and the running back. Although
Mhm.
Pearson Downs is a much better situation than what the Raiders have at receiver. So, they'll get utilized as well. But yeah, I mean, JT, and there's not much negative to say.
Yeah, no, I mean, I'm just gonna go through some of his numbers from last year in the first 10 weeks because, like you said, he was on pace to break records, but I don't even think that does it justice because these are just like looking at them again are eye-opening. So
Yeah,
some of his finishes, I'll go through his finishes, some of his biggest finishes in the first 10 weeks: 30, 33, 32, 24, 34, 37, 50. And those are all just from the
50.
first 10 weeks. Like you
Yep.
can mix in there was a 15-point week, a 13-point week, and a 7-point week, a dud. But otherwise, I mean, like you said, breaking records. He had three touchdown games in that span. So it was just a ridiculous start. Like this was one of the best running back seasons of all time, potentially. And then we saw Daniel Jones go down. Obviously, that changed it. It was like you said, it was bad. Like it really was bad. We never saw him go over 20 for the rest of the year when Daniel Jones got hurt after that bye. So it was bad, but just that extreme upside of even a competent, like Daniel Jones doesn't have to be exactly what he was last year on an 8-0 Colts team. He could just be competent, kind of control the offense. And I still think Jonathan Taylor returns to that form in some way. So it just doesn't need to be, it just can't be Riley Leonard. Like I feel
Yeah.
Jonathan Taylor can
Yep.
work with anyone who can kind of move the ball downfield. So that's why I have him at 3 over who we're going to talk about next. But it's just the ceiling so high, and he's had number one fantasy finishes before. He can push for that again in a fully healthy year with a competent quarterback.
Yeah. Yeah, I agree. And yeah, coming in at three, we have Christian McCaffrey, who that's the same across the board, all platforms, pros, ADP. Again, you could flip these two guys. The thing for me with McCaffrey is his ceiling is so much higher than JT to me. The receiving work, he had 102 receptions last year. Like that, 102 receptions for a running back. Let's take a look here real quick. Let me click on wide receivers and we'll take a look at the reception totals across receivers. Christian McCaffrey was one of six players last year. Actually, Trey McBride's probably in there too. Yeah. Seven players last year. So this is including tight end, wide receiver. Christian McCaffrey was one of seven players to have over 100 receptions. And he did that as a running back. And this guy also had the touches, the carries on the ground. He wasn't as efficient as a runner. I get that. But the receiving work alone, like he had weeks where you take out all the rushing work, he would have had a very good day as a receiver alone. And to me, like, the touchdowns were there. He had 10 rushing touchdowns, 7 receiving touchdowns, almost 1,000 yards through the air. Like this dude was just insane. I just it's hard for me to say JT is higher. Would I draft JT over McCaffrey? Maybe. I mean, we just talked about it with Saquon, the 400 touches the year prior. McCaffrey had over 400 this past year. They might try to get some other guys a little bit of work in there. They've talked about it a lot. There's the injuries, there's the electrical plant already destroying players in San Francisco. But yeah, it's just for me, it's like as much as I want to doubt and say, oh, well, McCaffrey could get hurt again, like I just don't want to do that because the second you do that, you could miss out on a insane finish like McCaffrey had last year. So it's I'm flipping back and forth, like I said, but the receiving work is really what pulls me above JT here.
Yeah, no, and it's fair. Like you said, I could flip flop them in my own rankings too. It just, went with JT. But yeah, it's just funny how we kind of do this dance every year about like, oh, he might get hurt. It's like, well,
Yeah,
we know the outcomes. 2 years ago, everyone got burnt taking him at the 101, and you probably lost your fantasy league unless you, but,
yeah,
and then you take him in the late first last year or wherever he was going, and you probably win your fantasy league. So, like, we know the volatility there. It's going to just be the same thing every year. So, you just got to kind of put your stamp, like, I'm okay. Like, I'm okay taking the risk to potentially win my fantasy league. And I feel like that's what we do it for, right? Like you want guys that can help you win your league, and this is the poster boy for it. That if he puts together another even half of what, maybe not half, but like 75% of what he did last year, you're in a really good spot with your fantasy team. And I almost feel like, as you were kind of talking about the receiving work, it almost puts like it kind of made me think of like when you think of Saquon, this was a 2,000 yard rusher, kind of doing it all on the ground, and with handoffs. But like I feel like CMC being more of a receiving back kind of maybe helps him take the load off of in terms of like just getting carry after carry. Like he can kind of go do it in space, kind of create in the receiving realm of things. But their 400 touches, obviously the history there, it is real, but I just feel like some guys are different. Like we've seen it with Derrick Henry, just a different animal. Like you've seen it with Alvin Kamara. He was just different for 15, or I mean, not 15, like 10 plus years of just being a fantasy stud. So I think Christian McCaffrey definitely has the pedigree to fit into that realm of just being different. And I have no problem drafting him where he's going right now.
yeah. I also think there's a lot of risk with McCaffrey, right? We talked
Yeah.
about it. But at the same time, the guys after him, especially JT, they come with a lot of risk. Like
Yeah.
JT is not just a safe guy. When they started losing games, when they lost Daniel Jones, he was not the same. He never really lost you a week, but he wasn't winning you weeks.
Hmm.
So, um, there's risk really with every name we've just mentioned. So that's why it's easy to put McCaffrey back up there because he comes with the most upside out of this group.
Yeah.
So it's just, which risk do you want to take? That's
Yeah, because if he goes down, there's going to be people like, "I told you so," but it's really like, how could you do that? Like,
yeah.
it's we all know what the volatility comes with him. So
hmm Yeah, and these two now at the top, these two for me, it's easy. I don't think there's risk with these guys at all. And you guys know who these top two are. A lot of people are going back and forth, but for us, we're both in the same boat. Bijan Robinson comes in at two. Across the board, I believe that's where he is. The pros got him there, and ADP's got him there, two across the board. It seems too that the pros just lowered him because he used to be at one for the pros. But yeah, Bijan, you can't go wrong. I mean, this dude was so good last year. He was unreal. Like having him on one of my teams was so much fun. This dude was just like he gets the receiving work, he gets the rushing work, and he's just really, really good. So you know, there's really not much more to say. I think he's in a great situation. There's no risk with him, and it's easy to put him above the rest of the running backs here. You can't go wrong taking him, and I think he should go personally at the 102. So that's yeah, just you gotta love Bijan.
Yeah, no, there really isn't much else to add. I mean, this is kind of those running backs we spoke of before that I just mentioned of like a Derrick Henry, Alvin Kamara, Christian McCaffrey. Like this is an example of one of those guys entering that prime of like if he's not already in it at like what 23, 24 years
Something
old.
like
So
that. Yeah.
this is just an example of that where like this is gonna be a top two running back for the next 5 years. And they no, we're just going to pencil him in. And yeah, so another monster. He's in store for another monster year. Stefanski comes in there to
Mhm.
kind of yeah, I guess a change of scenery of where a lot of Bijan's Bijan owners over the years have kind of been turned away by his coaching staffs and how he's kind of been utilized. So I think at this point it would be malpractice to use him any differently than he's been used the past couple of years, and I don't think Stefanski will do that. So yeah, another monster year.
And you'll get the Tua dump offs, and which both of us failed to mention, probably the biggest piece, no more Algier, which means those
Yeah.
goal line touchdowns, those are going to him. Those goal
Wow.
line
Yeah.
carries are going to be his. So, I mean, that's huge. Like that is huge. So, yeah, Bijan in for another monster year. Like I said, my 102 overall, hands down. And
Yeah.
coming in at number one for us very clearly, Jameer Gibbs, same across the board, pros, ADP. And I'll start with why I have Gibbs here because it's very easy for you to go either way. No more Algier. You got Stefanski, Tua dump offs. Bijan did it last year. He was so good. My thing about Gibbs is one, there's no more Montgomery, and without Montgomery, Gibbs is like the best fantasy player like ever. His stats and his averages without Montgomery were like through the roof. And listen, there's just too much of his touches vacated for Pacheco not to get work. Pacheco will get his, but it's going to be mostly Gibbs now. And I think Gibbs will be a goal line rusher because he was very good doing that last year. And Pacheco's not a big dude who it's like, okay, we brought in a big body to take the goal line work. It's going to be Gibbs's work. He was very good at the goal line, inside the five. He's an amazing receiver. Like I said, he was better than LaDainian Tomlinson in terms of his fantasy averages. So he's that good without Montgomery. My also big reason why I have him over the Falcons is, or over Bijan, is because the Lions are a lot better than the Falcons. I think the Lions are going to have a much better offense. I'm very excited for the Lions this year. I got them winning the division, and they have, according to Warren Sharp, they have the number one easiest schedule in the league. So when you put that together, we saw it last year. McCaffrey had the number one easiest schedule as the 49ers did, and it turned out to be great. Now Gibbs gets that with the Lions. I'm all in on Gibbs. I think he's the easiest 101 in a long time, probably. It feels hands down like this is a guy. And then if you have two and you get Bijan there, that feels fantastic too.
Yeah.
But
Yeah.
yeah, all in on Gibbs this year.
Yeah, no, I mean Gibbs was my one too, or my one overall. But and I think just to tack on another piece, yeah, obviously there's the Montgomery thing, and I think that's a big difference from Algier with Bijan, which we just talked about, because Montgomery was a very talented football player. Not to say Algier wasn't, but we see Montgomery on his own team and see the sort of projections that he's getting. So that's what Gibbs had to deal with in sort of like a committee kind of thing. But we all knew it was Jameer Gibbs's backfield, even with Montgomery there. And I think another reason why it makes the 101 for me is because of the fact that he had 4 35 plus point games last year, and one of them being 55 points, which is probably one of the highest scoring fantasy finishes ever for a week. And I just think he has that like record breaking upside that Bijan maybe doesn't necessarily have. And like that's not something that takes away from Bijan. I think he's potentially a more consistent player, but like pushing into the fact that these record-breaking performances that Gibbs has already shown he can put up could happen on a more consistent basis without him, David Montgomery there, and more touches involved, more receptions involved. It just feels like there's more in the tank somehow after his finishes the past couple of years, which is crazy to think about. So, yeah, I just think that like record-breaking upside is what makes him the clear one in the running back position. But that's not to take anything away from Bijan. I think you're just as happy at the 102 getting Bijan. And I wouldn't really blame you for taking Bijan over Gibbs. I think we both have him pretty much stamped at the one, but you can't blame a person for going Bijan.
For sure. Yeah. I mean, some exciting names here for sure. Top 12 guys. There you go. That's now you got our top 24 running backs there. Top 12, a little more straightforward, right? But yeah, I think there's some exciting names, some good running backs again this year. Next episode, not sure when that'll be. It might be a little bit, it might be later this week. We got to figure it out. But next episode, regardless, will be our hot takes episode. Then, we'll get back into the rankings with wide receivers, 2 episodes of wide receivers, and our tight end episode. Um, and then my guys, and yeah, we're at the season.
Yeah.
So super exciting. But yeah, we're gonna do the hot takes. We'll get that out for you guys next. Couple more rankings and my guys. So yeah, whenever you see the next one, just be expected for some hot takes. Hopefully, we come with some spicy ones. I know we did last year. We did some real spicy ones. We'll go over them again in that episode. See how we did. But yeah, fun episode. Love doing the rankings as always. And if you disagree, feel free to let us know in the comments. If you agree with anything, let us know. Leave a like, comment, share, subscribe, do it all. But with that, we'll see y'all in the next episode.
Peace.